Welcome to the Home Building Hub, your essential podcast guide to building your new home. Hosted by industry experts Colin Bischoff and Darren Brennan, this conversational podcast will help better educate you about all things new home building so you can avoid costly mistakes and enjoy your building experience to the fullest, no matter which home builder you choose.
Hey there, folks. Welcome to the Home Building Hub. You're with Colin and co-host Darren Brennan, as always. And today, Daz, we're going to talk about something I think is going to be quite helpful and educational. We're going to talk about how long does it really take to build a new home. And not only that, we're going to cover the expected timeframes you should allow for, from a contract through to a permit, through to end of construction, single stories, double stories. We'll talk a little bit about the contract days and how that sort of works and what that means, and really just give you the best, understanding of how to plan forward in your new home build, process, if you're renting or whatever it is, so you can try and, line up those timeframes as best as possible, Daz, because that's one of the most common things that we come across.
Absolutely, mate. Morning and g'day to our listeners, I guess. Whatever time of the day it is you're listening in. But I think it's a really good one, Colin. I think obviously, over the last couple of years, there's been some massive blowout in time frames. So it's really nice to see a lot of those time frames come back into what we would have expected to be the norm, of sort of, pre-COVID times. And I think those times are back now, which is fantastic. So, I'm happy to kick things off in that space, if you like, mate, and rip straight into it. But I guess one of the most common misunderstandings is how long does it take to build your home, and how long does it take to actually get from the time you pay a builder a deposit to get to site and start actually seeing the construction of your home begin. And reality is that's from you've got the pre-time prior to that also, that you're doing all your homework. You might be, getting several quotes from different builders, looking at different designs and stuff. So that's even before you've paid the builder a deposit. And then from the time you pay them a deposit till you get to site start is, it's a reasonable length journey depending on many different circumstances. But, it's not happening overnight, I guess, is probably the key. And a lot of people want it to happen overnight, but it doesn't happen that way. So I guess we want to give you a bit of a guide to that. Timeframes, what they're roughly going to look like. And again, vary builder to builder, circumstance to circumstance, but it does help plan out when you're going to get the keys. And again, it's a great time of year. A lot of people now starting to think about, I want to be in my house by the start of 2026 so that I can have my kids go to the school that's around the corner, etc. So they're in that sort of a position. And, we've all been there before, Cole. I know, that hustle to try and make that happen. And then if things don't, what do? I know, mate, for a while there, you were doing a big commute to get across because you've enrolled your kid into a school, and then, you were driving miles, mate, more than most people would every day, trying to get your daughter to school. So they're the challenges, right? So getting that and planning that out pretty well can be really, really, really important. I guess the truth is there's no straight answer, however, and the reason that is you've got different lots. So again, different circumstances around that, different areas, so dealing with different councils, different developers, all these things that are outside the builder's control can impact that time frame. But to give you a bit of a rule of thumb, I guess in a rough time frame, you're looking at about 3 months, if you've got a title block of land. And that's the other bit, if you've got a title block of land. So if you don't have a title block of land and that's not titling for a year, you're probably really allowing a year plus 2 to 3 months, right? So be mindful of that. And then you want to allow roughly 6 months to build a single story. And I think that's a good amount of time. Some will be a little bit shorter, a little bit longer, but around about 6 months. And on a double story, sort of 8 to 9 months. On a double story, say up to about 40 squares. And if you're over 40 squares, you might be, allowing a little bit longer, maybe 10 to 12 months in that sort of time frame. So if you add the presite and the onsite bits together, so you paid a deposit to getting the keys to your home, you want to allow somewhere 9 to 12 months for a single, and you want to allow somewhere about 12 to 15 months for a double-story home. And I think that's a pretty good guide to where that sits right now, Colin. And again, that'll be builder dependent, but that's roughly the number you probably want to be thinking about when you walk in the front door of a display home or you first make an inquiry with a builder. So,
Yeah.
any thoughts on that, mate? How do you see that? I mean, that'd be pretty much in time with what you guys deliver.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. We generally say 6 months for the build. Thankfully, as you said, the industry's now back on track with timing. So our builds and the industry's builds, for the most part, they're within single stories within 6 months. Some will do 4 if it's a little house. Some will do 7 or 8. But it's not like you're waiting, like what we were not that long ago.
Yeah,
So a full 12 months has gone by, and a full cycle of sales and completed builds from those sales has now happened. And when we're not just saying it might take, it actually is now, the proof is in the pudding this year in 2024. We've seen those builds being completed in a much more manageable, realistic time frame, which is a
absolutely.
great thing to report back on, Daz. So I want to highlight one thing that I think people miss is um, Darren's timeframes he's talking about is from contract signed. Okay, so contract signed to a permit issued and a site start is about 3 months. Yes, you can get it in 2 months, maybe, if it's jetting through the system. But you would have to have your finance in order, and the builder would have to get the property info ordered real quick, and blah blah blah. A lot of boxes need to be ticked really quickly. It's achievable, but you may as well just allow contract signed 3 months to a permit on average, right? And then add your 6 months for the single story build. That's where we get the 9 months from. That's probably a really good allowance to put in. So I'll repeat, it's contract signed. A lot of people pay a deposit many weeks or even months before that contract is signed because they wanted to lock in a promotion, and then, all that sort of stuff, or the land fell through, they've got to get another block, or their finance, hasn't got a pre-approval, so they've got to wait for this or that, or they're just, as a client, you're being indecisive. You're changing the
Yeah,
plan, you're changing what's included, you're changing the quote back and forth, you're comparing with other ones. Like, the reason it takes whatever time it takes to get to contract is usually not necessarily the builder. They'll do the drawings, they'll do the colors, they'll do the contract. But sometimes it's quite often the client that does delay that a bit through indecision, and that's not wrong. It's just reality. So yeah, from contract signed, make sure you understand that part. I think it's really important to note, Darren, whilst we say these generic or general timeframes, your contract's going to have longer than that in it. So contractually, there will be a number of days in your contract that says, e.g., 260 days for a single story or 290 days for a double story build times. And then in addition to that, there'll be like another 30 days or so. It's up to the builder, allowing for things like weather, like bad weather, can't pour a slab, things like that, or holidays and things like that on top of that also. So 260 days becomes 290 days in terms of your contract time frames. However, the builder doesn't want it to take that long. It costs the builder money every day to keep your site running, right? They're paying for the temp fence and the bin and all this sort of stuff. The quicker the builder can complete your house, the better it is for their bottom dollar too. Okay, so don't
absolutely.
think it's a builder deliberately holding anything up. They're covering their backside, saying, look, it's 260 days plus 30 for inclement weather, etc. If they go over that, there's a thing that's called damages in your contract, and that might be, let's say, $250 a week. Builder pays you. Okay. Now, we've been through a period in the last few years of extensive delays, or excessive delays, I should say. That's not happening now, thankfully. So everyone's sort of confident to go back to those days and not send out those extension letters. So that's another thing to consider. So contract signed to permit 3 months. Contractually, you will have a number of days that you need to look at and sign off and acknowledge, but the builder's not aiming to take that long. They want to be shorter than that, just FYI. The last thing with timing, Darren, I want to indicate, this is one that most people don't even think about until it happens. If you're getting a private building inspector through your home, right, independent private building inspector, through one stage, let's say they're going to do PCI stage, the builder will have somewhere a time frame that they will add onto your contract days. In most cases, it might be, let's say, 21 days. So if you get one inspection, 260 days, or sorry, 290 days now becomes 21 days longer than that because you've requested an inspection. Nothing wrong with doing that. But please understand, it sounds like a lot, 21 days, right? But that is per inspection. Okay. So if you get 5 inspections, all stages, it's going to add 105 more days to your contract days before the builder has to pay you those damages, that $250 a week, right? And most people, when we first say that to them, they're like, that's excessive. That's crazy, rah, rah, rah. But
You're ripping me
when you
off.
think
What's this?
about it, A, arrange the appointment. B, complete the appointment. C, review the items from the report. D, rectify the items from the report. E, go back again and make sure that items have been rectified. All of a sudden, 21 days or 3 weeks can go by pretty quick, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing to please be aware of. We encourage, by all means, go and get private building inspected, but they will add days to your contract. Okay, so that's one. I think, Darren, that 99% of people who build a house have no idea about until they ask that question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other bit is also for every $10,000 worth of additional amounts of goods you've got in your home, the contract time blows out usually by another 7 days. So there are some thresholds there. So again, if you've got a really expensive home, then expect the home to take the contractual time to take longer because there's just more work to get done. You're starting to add, a whole lot of extra cabinetry throughout the home. It just takes longer to put it in. So
Yeah,
allow more time for that. If you've got a really expensive facade, it probably has a whole lot of, detail on that that's going to take longer to build. So therefore, the builder has the right to add more time to the contractual time. And I think you're really right, Cole. There's the two bits. There's the reality is builders will finish a home generally well within the contractual time, but their only obligation is to the contract. And
yeah,
so I think the other bit that does get people caught is they talk to the builder and they say, "Well, how long is it going to take to build my house? 6 months?" And they go, "Great, I'll just give notice now," not knowing
yeah,
that the contract says I've got 9 months, and then there's been some wet weather delays and a few other bits and pieces, and they're not even delays that they have to even declare yet. And they can push out to 8 months, and you're getting out of your house 2 months before that. So
yeah,
make sure you're in open communication with your um, builder, and try not to give notice on a rental property too early because you're going to get caught. And we see it all the time. People screaming, "Hold on, I've got nowhere to live. I've got to move all my furniture out." That's not the builder's problem in reality. And as harsh as that might sound me saying it that way, you
mm,
just got to be mindful that don't get caught in that trap. So just, maybe allow a little bit more time than you expected to exit your rental. And I know that can sometimes be a juggle because you've got repayments and rentals, etc. But,
yeah,
you just don't want to be caught that you're having to move out of your house and you've got nowhere to live.
yeah.
So,
In the spirit of being just like blunt and honest, managing your rental, for example, it's so hard for a client to do that because the landlord may say, "Well, I don't want to do month to month. You got to commit 6 months or 12 months or
yeah,
whatever." I respect that's so difficult because I've been there before. I know that's such a juggle. But unfortunately, in the world we live in, what has happened is there was a day, there was a time where a builder's supervisor or your customer service person could say to you, "Look, we expect it to be done in the next 4 weeks, the next 6 weeks, the next 8 weeks, all things being equal." But if you say that now, the client holds you to that, right?
yeah,
So it's actually the majority have ruined it, or minority have ruined it for the majority because of that. Now a builder's terrified to give a time frame within a week or two, unless they're right at PCI. That's all been ticked
yeah,
off, and they know handover can be happening pretty quickly after that. So please, I guess, respect that if you're going to force a builder to give you a time frame, you're only backing them into a corner and they're only answering it because you're doing that. So have a little bit of understanding that there's some things outside of their control because they're relying on third party trades and suppliers and things like that. And that, it's not like if they're building 100 homes or 1,000 homes, doesn't matter. Things can still go wrong. Delivery can be delayed, or something can arrive on site and get damaged and chipped or stolen or whatever, and that can then
yeah.
delay again. So things can
Or,
happen on
or
a
a
building
trade
site,
stick,
and I
if the
guess
trade doesn't show up for whatever reason. They've been held up on another job, so it delays, a couple of days here and there, and then that stops another trade that's now delayed
it
because they're
does
waiting on
because
works.
they're in tandem. Trade D can't do anything till trade C is done. Trade C
True.
can't do it till B's done. So if trade A is delayed, you actually got to push all the other three back. Builders do their best to juggle and manage that, but just please understand, boxing a builder into a corner to give you a time frame and then like blasting them for that if they didn't hit it, that's what's happened. And as a result, builders will now be really hesitant to give you a proper time frame, which would be greatly helpful, because then you can give your notice at the right time. So it's a real tricky one, Darren, but I hope we've explained that well enough for people to at least understand both the client and builder side of that discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, Cole, one of the questions we get, why does it take so long to get to site? Why does it take 3 months to get to site? And the answer is there's a lot to do. Right, so there's a fair bit going on there, and in the background, as much as you're thinking, well, my builder's doing nothing at all, I can't imagine they're doing anything. There's a fair bit going on. So some of those steps that, and sorry, the other part in that is often those things going on are done by third parties. So they're relying on others to get that stuff done. But depending on the builder, it could be getting the colour appointment finalised, getting that all signed off by yourself, the customer, and having all that done. Waiting on yourself, the customer again, to get their finance approval. So providing the contract, any back and forth from the bank, they might want to see other information from the builder, so they're providing that. Ordering the property information such as soil tests and surveys, those sort of things, if they haven't already been done. Obtaining developer approval, and again, depending on the developer and depending on the person doing those developer approvals, some of them fly through, send it in, rubber stamped, approved, let's go. Others down to the infinite detail of back and forward and just tough for the builder, tough for the consumer. These people are like, no, I've got the rubber stamp. I'm not going to stamp it until you do what I tell you to do, sort of attitude. So we juggle that. We've got to prepare the full working drawing. So often what you see, particularly in the early days, is a set of standard plans, but you don't have the full working drawings with all the detail of how to build some of this stuff behind what happens. So you might have a post on your porch that's got a downpipe running down the middle of it, and then they have to go and draw how to actually build that, because otherwise they get on site and they're like, well, where's the downpipe go? Right? So they provide all of that in the full working drawings. Obtaining engineering. So, an engineer actually has to provide a certification of or a plan of how to, for example, build your slab, and then how to build your frame so that they're actually going to last. We don't want them falling over. You've got to get an energy rating. So, you've now got the whole of home rating also as part of that. They've got to lodge to get a permit. So they'll be either dealing, depending on how they operate, through their surveyor or through the council. They need to place the orders with the suppliers and get all that lined up so that the suppliers now know when, and likewise the trades. They need to make sure that they're all lined up, ready to go. And we can now get your slab poured, the fencing up, or whatever, get things kicked off. So there's a fair bit go on in the background over that period of time. And you can only do certain things once other stuff's been completed. It's not like you can go, we'll do all this at once. No, I need this in before I can do the next step, a bit like we're talking about earlier with the trade. So there are a lot of steps by third parties, as we mentioned, and they're often out of the control of the builder. They will often have, benchmark times. Doesn't mean they always hit those benchmarks, so they'll be trying to hold them accountable to that. The other part is the customer can often delay that process also. So, for example, if you go to your colours and you can't make up your mind on the day and you've got to go back again, you might not be able to go back for 2 or 3 weeks. Doesn't mean you just come back the next day. There's other people booked in. So that can be a challenge. You might not just want to sign off on it because you want to think about it. You want to go and consult with your friends and family around those sort of things. Can take a while for people to approve their drawings. So their drawings are sent out asking them to approve it. Absolutely, we want you to check it to make sure it's right, and that obligation is on you. That's why they get you to sign it off to check it, but don't take 6 weeks to check it. And again, don't send them halfway around the world 3 times to try and get them checked by all these other people to validate what you're doing. Check to make sure it's what you've what you're hoping for and liaise with the builder as quickly as possible on that. Getting your finance approval, right? Sending that information off immediately to your broker or to your bank to get your finance approval underway and keeping them accountable. How are we going on that? Have you sent it off if it's through a broker? Has it gone to the bank? Was there anything else you needed me to provide? Did you need more bank statements, pay slips, etc., etc.? Just responding to emails and phone calls, and we're all busy, and sometimes we miss stuff. But making sure you're on top of that sort of stuff. It's pretty easy to add a month or two to the process. If you're not holding up your end of the bargain as well as the customer. So, the builder's relying on those feedback both ways to get things to site as soon as possible. And, what we don't want to do is, as builders, we want to get you to site as soon as possible. So it's in our interest to push as quickly as we can, but likewise, it's in yours. So sometimes there will be delays because of you, the customer, not doing stuff in what the builder has sort of set as a generic time frame. Colours is a great example. A lot of builders expect you to sign it off on the day. So they're saying you'll go do your colours today and sign it off and say, I'm happy with all of those things on the day. And if you don't, you're already delaying their process of trying to get you to site in that window that they offer. And we're saying it's a rough idea, 3 months. All of a sudden, you might be 3 months in a day or 3 months in a week because you haven't signed it off. So that's sort of where that's at, Cole, from a why does it take so long to get the site?
Yeah, there's a lot there. And in fairness, most builders don't talk about every single step of the process because it would just completely stress out the client, to be honest. There are so many things and so many technicalities and so much complexity in what's involved that the client already, the client has to deal with in terms of the house, the quote, the block, the drawings, that sort of stuff. There's enough for you to deal with. So you just got to entrust the builders just getting it done as much as they can. And some are, don't get me wrong, some builders are taking longer than they should and things like that. But just in general, the goal is to try and get the permit as quickly as possible. And sometimes a developer approval is a real key one that can delay things. Sometimes developers won't even look at the plan submitted for a month, and then it's another month to get it back. And it can happen like that. Finance is probably, Darren, the biggest delay from the client's point of view. That can take a long time. So I just want to highlight that there are some products and ranges that are click and collect or tick and flick. That's that plan, that block, no changes, color boards. When you go through that process with builders, a lot of builders have that as an option for you. That will generally reduce some of the timeframes on some of the items to prepare drawings and things like that. You won't need a colour appointment. So you can probably get through the system a bit quicker if you're selecting one of those ranges. But probably the best thing we can suggest is just be a little more prepared and understand that if you're getting drawings to review, know that's coming and get the review back within 2 or 3 days. That'll get the next step underway. If you've got finance, obviously you're getting finance through a lender, a broker, bank, etc. Get that stuff in order, in advance. Get it ready, get all your documents ready. The quicker you can respond and apply, those things at the right time, then it will help the builder push your job to the next step, the next one after that, and continue like that, which just makes logic sense, doesn't it, Darren? So,
absolutely.
It's also something that we encourage all clients to do is be prepared. And if you need to learn a bit more on all that sort of stuff, there's plenty of topics we happen to talk about, Darren, that educates everything through the process. So
I think
that sort of covers the, I guess, why does it take?
Another little bit in there would be builders will often incentivize people who have titled land. And essentially, if you've got titled land, you might be able to jump the queue a little bit, which is good, but they'll give you a bit of a discount because of that. But part of what they need you to do is get your job to site as soon as possible. That's what they're really incentivizing for. So again, they'll often hold you accountable to the timeframes much harder. And then you're thinking, gee, they're putting me under a lot of pressure. They're doing that because they're giving away margin on that job to get you your job to site sooner, because they work out their pricing based on how quick we can start this job and how quick it can fill a spot in their queue that just allows them to continue their business operating really efficiently. So, they'll often escalate your job through the system. Just be aware, and if there is a discount involved like that, a titled land discount, understand you're probably going to be pushed a little bit along the way to get stuff signed off quicker and get things done quicker so they can get you to site as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And sometimes they want to get you to site under 3 months, like they'll be really pushing to get you there because they're giving away a big discount to incentivize you to, fill up a spot that they have available. So just another part of that, I guess, escalated time frame.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we call those bins, like to fill the bins. But one analogy I've used over the days is a Connect 4 board, or, where you drop the chips into all the spots. Essentially, each line represents a month, and the builder, your job is one chip. So when the builder fills up one row, that's March, then the next row is going to be April and May and so on. But if your chip has to be moved because you've taken too long, or the developers, whatever, something's delayed it, you're going to take it out of that first row and pop it in the second one. Now there's a hole. There's one of those other ones. So we've got to grab a job that we've already got and see if we can fast track it and drop it back from April back to March. Or we need to find a new job that's titled land, give them a discount, get them in the system, get them through real quick so we can put that new chip in that hole that has been created. So hopefully that analogy makes sense.
Absolutely.
I think, go Darren.
I was going to say, I guess the last bit is, on site. And I guess what we're certainly seeing is much more manageable timeframes on site from site start to completion, which is great. And that's just freed up supply lines, trades, etc. So we're seeing a lot of that now much more under control. We're also seeing site supervisors not managing as many jobs. At times there were some builders where I'd heard some builders were running maybe 25 jobs per supervisor, which is astronomical. That's a huge number to try and run. A lot of those have come back down to sort of the industry standard, which I would say is somewhere between maybe 12 and 15 jobs at any one stage for a supervisor. Is a good number for them to be able to manage and do that effectively. So when they're running 25, it's just too much. And therefore they're not across their job as much. Takes a little bit longer to get trades in because they've got to sign off the work along the way. Those things aren't happening now, which is great. So we're seeing a lot more of that. Obviously, we can't speak for every builder, but what we're seeing is, we're back to the old times, pre-COVID times of builds, which is fantastic. And, the other bit is to just ask your builder directly, how long is it going to take to build my home, roughly speaking. Pardon me. That'll give you a good guide to where they're at this point in time as well.
Yep. Very nice.
Good.
Well, folks, hope you enjoyed that. There's some good insights there for you, and plenty of, I guess, insider information in terms of giving you a bit of a better understanding how it works for the builder's side of it, so that you, the client, can understand what's to come. So thanks again for watching or listening. We appreciate it, and hopefully we get to see you guys on the next one. If you have any questions, if you have any feedback, jump onto the website, homebuildinghub.com.au, and let's go from there. Thanks again, guys. See ya.
Good. Thank you. Thanks for listening to the podcast, guys. And just our disclaimer, whilst we're all about providing value to you, this podcast should not be considered as legal or financial advice. It contains general information only, and you should seek out independent professional advice on your personal situation before making any legal or financial decisions.
1, 2,